You're listening to Free Mama Radio, where we believe you can have both a successful business and show up as the mom you want to be. I'm your host, Lauren Golden, a mom who built a full-time income working part-time hours. Now, I help other moms like you learn how to work from home on your own terms, take control of your schedule, and make more money so you can live a totally awesome, guilt-free life. I am on a mission to make sure that no mother has to choose between family and financial stability. So if you've been wondering, can I really have it all? This podcast will give you the answers.
Today's lesson, I really want to talk about boundaries. So, if you've ever read my book, if you've ever heard me talk, if you've ever taken any of my programs, if you've ever interacted with me before ever, you know that my three favorite words ever are communication, expectations, and boundaries. And I really think that at the core of it, every single relationship, not just business relationship, but every kind of relationship, any problem, anything you're trying to navigate, any challenge, any opportunity, it really comes back to these three words. And I'm not trying to oversimplify, but it really does. But I've been seeing so many posts lately from you guys. And so I kind of wanted to address them all together because a lot of the time we can really start to overthink it, and we can post in a Facebook group like the Free Mama Facebook group. And if you don't know the people who are responding, you don't know their experience. It's like we've got to kind of take everything we hear on the internet with a grain of salt unless you really know and trust the person who's giving you that information. You know their track record, right? And so I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but I think we need to all just be mindful that you shouldn't be giving advice if you don't actually have experience with that. Or make sure when you communicate that advice that you're communicating, I haven't actually been in this situation, but here's what I think that I would do. My phone keeps going dark for some reason. So one in particular that I've seen lately is about posting your hours. So I just saw this over the weekend, and it might've been in the Free Mama Squad group, but somebody was wondering about, when I take on a new client, should I, it's so fun. I actually have someone messaging me right now about job opportunities. I'll go post that in the group after this. Somebody was posting about, when I'm on a discovery call with a client, or I'm talking with a potential client, or maybe when I get to that contract phrase, should I be having really set hours of this particular person is still at a 9 to 5. She's like, should I say that my business hours are 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. and, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. On my contract? Or do I need to tell them that up front, or all these things? And I get it. We want to be transparent, and you should be, by the way. I'm not at any, it was Mary. Awesome. Mary, I don't think you were the only one though. In fact, I know that you weren't, Mary, because the person who posted it, I didn't know what they did, and I know what you do. So I'm telling you, you guys, every time I do a Facebook Live, it's stuff that I'm seeing over and over and over again. So lots of boundaries conversations, and especially heading into the holidays where you might want to take time off, or you might just be working at unusual times, compared to your normal schedule or anything like that. It makes sense that a lot of these questions are coming up, and vacation time, and how do I communicate that with my client if I'm a VA who's charging hourly, or a VA on a retainer. This came up in the Free Mama Squad with someone who they get paid for a package of hours, but she actually didn't know that. There was a miscommunication because, again, communication, expectations, boundaries. The person who had hired her was under the assumption that she was paying for a certain block of hours, whereas the freelancer was under the impression that she was getting paid a monthly retainer to complete certain services. Do you all see how if this person took a vacation, that's a miscommunication? Those are different expectations going into the conversation. And so both of them left feeling disappointed after this vacation was taken, because the entrepreneur was basically like, well, that's great. You got all your work done, but you took hours off, so I'm not paying you the full rate. And the freelancer was like, I don't feel valued by you anymore, because you're telling me that even if I get my work done, if I'm not clocking certain hours, that I'm not worth that pay. Do you guys see how this is okay, so let's go backwards. So same thing, communication, expectations, boundaries, but we've got Mary and a few other people posting should I post my hours? Here's my response to that. Honestly, probably not. Possibly, but probably not. Here's the deal. You guys aren't a brick and mortar. You don't need to necessarily post what time someone can walk up to your store and expect to walk in and be able to purchase something. Instead, what I want you to think about is, how do you clearly communicate your personal boundaries to the client, and how do you manage their expectations? So really, this is communications, boundaries, and expectations. I think on Facebook, I just wrote boundaries. They are very intertwined, the three things. And so my first response to that person was, well, what service are you providing? And I think she said, I really want to be a copywriter, but right now I'm doing more general virtual assistant tasks. And so I said, here's the deal. And again, this is why it's situational, you guys, which is why I want you to understand the strategy and not just the tactical answer to the question. It's not, yes, you should have hours and you should put it in your contract and you should talk about it on your discovery call and make sure it's on your email out of office every week and blah, 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 blah. Like, you guys, people who you're seeing who do that, that's great. They are clearly communicating their boundaries to manage other people's expectations. There's probably a reason that they got to that point. Now, I'm not saying don't have these things tactically, but what I'm trying to teach you guys is let's understand the strategic level over that, which is knowing your boundaries and honoring them, by the way, because people will treat you how you let them, and also managing your clients' expectations and not just managing them, but then exceeding them. And by exceeding them, I don't mean working when you're not supposed to work. I mean over delivering, right? So for example, going back to this person who posted with the copywriting example, who cares what your hours are? Like, I think that it would be very, very unusual for a client to go, are you working from 8 to 5 every day? Like, that would be very bizarre because that's such a project delivery. Now, you might be on a monthly retainer writing blog posts or emails or a sales page or whatever. You might be on a retainer, but that's all about delivering and meeting deadlines. So the communication there isn't what time are you going to be writing my emails? That would be very bizarre, I would think, in my experiences working online. But what would be important is when do they need this information by? What's the deadline that you need to have the information to them? And what's your deadline for meeting with them to make sure that you get it in time? Because that's something I coach a lot of women on as well, right? You get hired to do a certain thing, but then the entrepreneur is missing and you can't get a hold of them. And so you're super frustrated because you're like, I can't finish this blog post until we chat about what you want the blog post about, but I'm feeling like I'm up against a deadline. These are your boundaries and you need to have hard boundaries that you communicate. But again, it's not about posting your hours well, I work from 8 to 1 every day. It's no, what are my boundaries in terms of, okay, if I have to deliver this within a week, my boundaries are that I will not be able to meet deadlines when my clients don't make themselves available within 7 days out, right? Or before the 7 days out period, because I need 7 days to write. So that's the strategy. That's the boundary. And then it's up to you guys to navigate that in between. And you need to clearly articulate your expectations and your client needs to articulate theirs, right? They're going to set that deadline. And this is when we over deliver, right? Not that you can't go to the deadline, but how can you get it to them sooner? How can you show them a preview of what you're working on, a sample to get them excited and keep them engaged in the process? Those types of things. So hopefully that makes sense. Now let's go over into someone who maybe is working more hourly or someone who's working as a virtual assistant. Again, sometimes your hours, your availability might be pertinent, right? And you can kind of feel this out on the discovery call. If you're working with someone who's got a lot of stuff going on during the day and they expect high touch, high response time, maybe they have team meetings and calls that you're expected to be a part of, and you're thinking in the back of your head that that you're still at a 9 to 5. So how could you possibly be on a team call at 10? You need to be really honest with yourself and that other person, because otherwise, if you're going to try to go forward because you really want or need that client to meet your goals, but you know that you're going to misrepresent yourself and not meet their expectations, that's not going to end very well. So you need to be really transparent and say, you know what, that might not be a good fit for you. That client at that time while you're at your job might not be a good fit. On the flip side of that, for a lot of people who are managing calendars or people's email inboxes, a better question might be, instead of what are your hours, a better question where you can be kind of in charge of the conversation and come from a place of authority for what you do and the service you provide is, what is your expectation for response time? Some people, I get emails all the time from things that I'm a part of or lists I'm on or inquiries I make or whatever. And they'll say, we'll get back to you within 48 hours. 24 hours. Now, if it's something like e-commerce, and I don't know, I will never pretend like that is a world that I'm an expert in. But if you're on a discovery call with someone and they say their response time is within the hour and you're only working before your kiddos wake up in the morning and after they go to bed, again, that's an integrity check. Even if that's your dream client, it just might not be the right time for you to serve that person. And so that's where you need to get really honest. But rather than having these blanket statements about, should I post my hours? How do I talk about time off? Really, we all need to master having really clear communication skills, learning to ask and then receive and then communicate our own expectations. Because if you don't know how to measure success in your client's eyes, you're going to have a lot harder time putting a bow on it, right? Like it's going to be hard for you to wow someone when you don't even know what their standards and expectations are for whatever it is that you're providing to them. And then lastly, with boundaries, like I said, it's up to you to communicate them. Like, for example, there's someone on my team who takes time off pretty regularly. She's got some time off this month. She'll literally just send me an email. Now, what she does, she can do in advance or she can do later and play catch up. And because we have trust with each other, I don't even really ask. I just mark those days off on my calendar so that I'm not reaching out to her, on Voxer or text message or whatever, because I want to respect her boundaries of, hey, I'm out of the office today. But it's also her responsibility as the freelancer to go, is there anything important going on during that time that I can prep and get ready and scheduled in advance? So do you see how it's not like we can't focus on like the nitty gritty as much? It's really how do we master those skills so that we can have really good relationships with the people that we're serving. Mary says, I need to reset boundaries for my first client. Any advice on how to renegotiate or reset boundaries? Yes, always. Really, you're probably overthinking it, Mary. So number one, I would say, do you have a contract with this person? If the answer to that is no, great. Now that we're going into a new year, you fall on the sword, right? So you take the blame. Hey, Susie, I always pick Susie. Hey, Susie, I have been enrolled in the Free Mama Squad and I've been working with my business coach. And I realized I really missed a step when we first started working together and I should have known better. But as I grow in business, I want to make sure that I'm legitimate and not just protecting myself, but also protecting you and the rest of my clients. And so with January 1 coming up, it's a really great time for us to get on a contract. And it's also a time for us to be able to look at the work that we're doing together and assess, is there anything else I can do to help you? I noticed you were working on XYZ, or this scope of project has really shifted. Can we talk about that? I love new months are pretty good, but new quarters and new years, woo, what a great time to reset, right? That's such a great time to have a conversation and go, I'm working on my Q4 goals or we're getting set up for Q1 next year. And I just want to have a really great conversation. Again, whenever you can assume responsibility, which by the way, we should all be doing. I saw a post this morning from the amazing Hannah, who is in the Free Mama Inner Circle for Life. And her post made me think of a book that I've read called Extreme Ownership, which I highly recommend to all of you guys. And this is one of those conversations, Mary, where you need to do that. You need to assume extreme ownership. So you might be sitting there right now, and I know you, Mary, so you're probably not doing this, but let's pretend that you're sitting there just being a total victim. Like, my client is such a jerk. She calls me all times of the day. She's not paying me enough. She's constantly changing the scope of our services. Like, let's just go super dramatic for a second. And Mary is sitting there like this. I don't even know if I want to keep working with this client because I am such a victim, right? Again, I know Mary's not doing this, but extreme ownership makes you look in the mirror and go, no, everything is my responsibility. Not from a pressure standpoint, but like, this is mine. I own it. I take extreme ownership. So Mary needs to step up. And again, depending on what those boundaries are those time boundaries, are those financial boundaries, are these project boundaries? You kind of need to think about what they are, but you take ownership for what's not working and then just make it a dialogue. Hey, as we're heading into the new year working together still, I wanted to check in with you and see from your perspective, what do you think's going really well? What do you think's working really well? And what do you think's not working as well? I'd love that feedback for you. And then I actually have a couple suggestions that I think could make our relationship stronger or XYZ deliverable better as well. And so some of that language is what I would use. But again, if you approach it defensively, even if this person is a total B, like, it doesn't matter. If you approach it that way, it's just not going to be received well. The person's going to be defensive. They're not really going to hear you. And so you're going to have a harder time getting the things that you want from this boundary reset, right? Another thing is always being complimentary. I've learned so much from you, blah, blah, blah. Genuine. I know I said blah, 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 but you guys don't ever say anything you don't mean. That will never, ever serve you well. You always have to be genuine, but something you've enjoyed from working with them or something you've learned from working with them or something you admire about their business. Like, anytime we can include that in the conversation. And then also empathy. Most people are extremely compassionate. So I'm trying to give a lot of different examples. Mary, I don't think this is you either, but another example might be actually just recently, someone on my team, they also just recently, Mia, a lot of you guys know Mia, she just moved and her schedule is changing with her kids, and my family just moved and my schedule is changing and a lot of things are up in the air. And so a boundary that she needed to communicate with me is, listen, my son's not going to be in preschool anymore. He's going to be home. So I'm not going to be accessible until the afternoons anymore. So we had to change a meeting. We're probably going to need to change our co-working call in the future. Things are just going to have to shift, but it was just communication. It was, and so there was a level of empathy there of like, hey, I know you're going through this right now. Also, I'm also going through this. And so if we can kind of talk about, your expectations and when I'm going to be working and when I can be available to you, just so here's some things going on in my life. But again, I think the important thing is, we always have to remember that we are solving a problem. As business owners, we solve a problem. It's not your client's job necessarily to accommodate you. And this is going to sting for some of you. Do I believe in healthy boundaries? 100%. And I think you should honor them because people will treat you as much as you let them, right? With that being said, if things start to shift and then you're not meeting their expectations anymore, that's when it becomes problematic. So just make sure that you're not being so like, no, I'm a free mama and I deserve freedom. And so everyone will pay me $1 million and I will work 1 minute a day. And I know no one's actually doing this, but sometimes I see people flirting with this in their businesses, and that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Nobody's going to be wowed and want to keep paying you if you are operating from a sense of entitlement. Does that make sense? So I just kind of want to throw that pro tip in there so nobody swings the pendulum so far to the side of boundaries that they're then no longer meeting their clients' expectations, because that's not going to work out very well.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Free Mama Radio. Don't forget to check out Free Mama TV right here on YouTube for hundreds of how-to videos and interviews to help you start, grow, and scale a virtual business from home. If you want to join a community of tens of thousands of moms just like you, make sure you join the Free Mama Movement group over on Facebook. And lastly, if you want to learn more about how we can do this together, work to achieve your goals, and make you our next success story, check out my free training at thefreemamamovement.com. I'll see you next time.